Well, if you guys have been thinking about creating better and thicker bedding habitat on your property for deer, I'm going to show you guys how I'm doing that today with these really strategic little bedding pockets. I'm going to be cutting down some red oak and some aspen, and I'll show you guys why I'm cutting those down and then what kind of benefits you can expect from them. First off, these red oaks, like the one behind me, if you flush cut these down low, you will get stump sprouting and the deer go absolutely nuts for it. I just happen to have a lot more red oaks on my property than bur oak. I will cut some of my bur oak down here and there if I need to, but usually I try to leave the bur oak because those are better mast producing trees for larger acorns that the deer prefer over the red oaks. They still like these, but they just like the bur oaks more. But you'll get that big explosion of young whips coming up off the stump of the red oak tree. So that's one of the really big benefits of it. And that it creates kind of that low growing bush effect that I want out here. Plus, when I drop the tree, we'll have the tops laying on the ground for immediate side cover, bedding cover, and just that screening to thicken the woods. All right, then I'll also cut down some of these popples, and I just happen to have a lot of these on my property as well. Aspen popple, same thing. I found that if you only cut down one or two of these real big ones, mature ones, you don't get a lot of suckering whips like you would if you cut a whole bunch of them. So think about that. If you're creating a strategic little tight bedding pocket, you'll need to cut down an area probably the size of a garage or maybe a house. And then the roots of these popples are all interconnected, and you'll get suckering whips off the roots that are real shallow and in the ground. But like I say, if it's only one or two, you're not going to see that big browse opportunity where you get that explosion and that regeneration of young whips. But you will get the top and debris laying on the ground that the deer will want to bed around, and you'll get that immediate side screening from the popples. So to talk a little bit about why I choose the spots and where, you guys can see behind me, this is just a generally pretty open part of my woods. Actually in the background there, you can see one of these other little bedding pockets that I created a few years ago, and we'll go look at those afterwards. But really the idea here is I'm trying to find these open areas that are kind of void of deer and where you can see all the way through the woods, all the way across. I'm trying to do two things. I'm going to create a pile of trees and I'm going to drop them inwards on each other to create immediate side screening and side cover, and so that you can't see all the way through my property. That's one benefit of what I'm doing. And then the other is I'm knocking a hole in the canopy to allow that sunlight onto the forest floor to stimulate that big flush of new vegetation and young bud growth. If you're thinking of doing this, my recommendation is start small. Don't try to do your whole property all at once, because as you learn the property over time, you may wish you would have put these bedding pockets somewhere else, or maybe you might overdo it the first day and you wish you could put some of those trees back. You don't want to make that mistake. This is very permanent when you drop these trees. So also think about where you want deer bedding. Before you fire your chainsaw up, you want to put your bedding in a strategic location next to your food where you're not walking through this and flushing them out of this bedding cover, every time you go back to hunt or go visit your food plot or whatever that may be. So I will show you guys some of these that I made a few years ago, and I'll show you some of the regeneration already coming, which is really cool. But before we do that, why don't I drop a couple of these red oaks and I'll show you what this one looks like. All right, you guys, I got all these trees dropped now. It's probably an area the size of a garage, I would bet, but that's gonna open up a pretty good hole in the canopy. I got a big dead jack pine right there that I'm leaving. That's kind of a nice nature snag. The woodpeckers and everything will like that, so I'll leave it. But this is that nice jumbled mess that I'm talking about. If there's a couple of smaller oaks or aspen, I might actually hinge cut those. I did on a couple of them back here. If they're small and manageable and safe to hinge. If they're big popples or big oaks, I don't do it. You run the risk of barber chair, especially those popples. they will barber chair on you. So make those normal flush cuts with your face cut and then the back cut. But if it's a real little one, I might just hinge it and lean it right on top of this pile, just to, I mean, that log will stay there for a long time. If it's up off the ground, you know, these logs that are on the ground will start to rot eventually, but those that are just kind of hinged and laying on top of the pile, it just gives you that side cover for that much longer. So the other thing you got to do with this, you guys, is if you create such a bad mess, and like in my case, this got a little bit long where I was cutting a couple extras down there, you got to cut deer paths open through these. If, you know, if it's a real small isolated pile, I just leave it because the deer can just walk around it. But you just don't want your property to become so thick and so jackstrawed and jumbled like this behind me that the deer can't even get through it. You want trails and paths for those deer to get through. So I'm gonna go open up one of those where I felt like this was getting to be a little bit too big of a pile and it might start to actually discourage deer from using this part of my woods. I'm gonna go open that up. Then we'll go take a look at some of these older cuts that I've done like this. All right, well, I just got this deer trail opened up. This is an example just to show you guys how I do it. I'm gonna do a lot of these around my little bedding pocket cuts that I'm making. This is really important so that the deer have escape cover and that they feel comfortable walking in and around these little blow down bedding pockets that I've created. I'm gonna come back probably one day and just open up a whole bunch of these to get all this bedding area cleaned up and ready for deer. So this is a really good example of what the red oak will do after it stump sprouts. So you can see all these little whips and stems down here. So there's where the old stump is down below, and you can just see a ton of little whips coming out of it. And that's what you can expect to get out of these nice red oaks if you've cut down a more mature tree. And they don't even have to be that big in order to get that real good stump sprouting from them. Now this has a ton of little whips coming up, and I might actually come in here with a hand clipper and just prune some of these stems. But I want to leave a lot of these because, again, this is what I'm going for. This is that really thick side cover. The other cool thing about red oaks is they hold their leaves where I'm at in northern Minnesota almost year round. These leaves will stay on here until this spring when the tree starts to push new buds. So these red oaks are almost as good as conifers as far as year-round screening goes. And I like kind of a low bush like this just to create as much screening cover and side cover as possible for the deer to make my property as thick as possible. You know, this tree is not going to win any beauty pageants if I leave it like this with all these whips down here, but that's not what we're after, right? If you were after board feet production, you would come in here and prune all this out and leave one tall tree in the middle and just try to get one strong trunk to grow up. But I'm going to leave it kind of bushy like this in order to maximize the thickness on my property. But this is an older cut that I did behind me here, and you can see all of the young brush coming up. It's going to take a few years in order to get enough vegetation coming back up in here. But you can see there's a lot of young red oak in here, tons of young hazel brush, which is just awesome. So I'm going to have varying age pockets of cover all over in my woods. I do a few of these little pocket cuts every year. That way I don't overdo it too much the first year and regret it. And then also it creates this staggered, layered effect of vegetation ages throughout my woods. I'm in one of my older bedding cuts that I created, and you can see how well used this deer trail is. They're really in here using these little lanes that I've cut open through all of the slash and tops that have been dropped. I've got a little trail that goes right here and out, and then another one that goes right here. And every one of these trails has got deer tracks on them. This is a little older bedding cut that I did, I think 3 years ago now. And you can see that a lot of the aspen whips are coming back up. Again, this was an area that was large enough to where I cut enough of the mature aspen where those roots started sending suckers up. And so, you know, these get browsed pretty heavily by deer too, but when you have, you know, these logs kind of crisscrossing laying here, it allows those plants to grow up without getting deer browsed. So I hope this video helped you. If it did, do me one favor and subscribe to my channel. That really helps me out. I appreciate it. Drop me any questions down below in the comments. I try to read and respond to all of those. So check that out. And until next time, you guys take care. I will catch you on the next video.